Hi, good evening. Welcome to our free webinar. It's a webinar on mediation, what to expect, and how to get more of what you want. So welcome. Thank you so much for joining me. I'm going to attempt to demystify what mediation is. I'll explain what it is, what the purpose is. You know, what's the end all for you? You know, what do you get out of it when it's all said and done? And so we're going to be talking all about that, and I'm going to be telling you the two most important things you need to make sure that you have in your mediation agreement before you leave that mediation session, okay? There's two important things, right? So we're going to be talking about that and covering that. So if you're facing mediation, if you're going through a divorce, or if you are having issues with child support and visitation, things like that, things related to kids and to divorce, a lot of times mediation is going to come up. And, you know, what is the big deal about mediation, and why, you know, why was it created? What is it intended to do? And why do judges love it? Okay, so let me take the first question. The purpose of mediation is really to help parents, people who are divorcing, but specifically parents who have to deal with each other after all this is said and done, if they have kids who are younger, even kids you have who are older. There are going to be weddings, there are going to be grandkids that come along, you know, and so it's really an opportunity for people who decide that they don't want to be together anymore, for them to sit down and have an opportunity to come to an agreement. And the rationale behind that is, okay, you know, if you're able to do that, then you'll be able to better co-parent and deal with each other down the road much better. It's more emotionally healthy for both people involved. And so that's the mindset of creating what mediation is. Now, judges love mediation because it gets cases off their table. They love that, okay? And so, you know, if they don't have to have a final trial, you know, you walk in with an agreement, judge is happy. He's like, yay, I don't have to sit here and try to figure out who's telling the truth. I don't have to sit here and really listen to things that are a lot of times very embarrassing for both people who, you know, and try to decide, you know, what's the right thing to do. And so they love it. It takes their caseload way down. So that's why judges love it. And that's why for a lot of places, a lot of states, a lot of jurisdictions, whether they're counties or states, it is pretty much almost mandatory for you to go to mediation if you're dealing with a divorce. Really the only exception to that, and that's very true in Texas, really the only exception to that is that if there was family violence involved in your relationship, because then there is that inherent or obvious unequal balance of power, because you have the one person who's the abuser and obviously the other person who's been the victim. And so they figure mediation isn't going to work because there's no way for you to not be able to sit there in fear and be under a cloud of fear and oppression and pressure to come to an agreement or to agree on something that other people normally would not. Hey Sharon, it's good to see you. Thank you so much for joining. If you know of other ladies who could benefit from this mediation free webinar, absolutely feel free to text them, okay? So I'll be on for a minute. It won't be too long. But now is a good time. Obviously, I'm here, so they'll be able to ask me questions live, okay? So, but it's good to see you. Okay, so we're going to be diving into mediation. All right, so that's really number one. What's the point? So that's the point of mediation, is to give the parties an opportunity to be able to walk away from this whole process, this whole divorce process, this whole process of just separating. Give them a way to do it that is a little bit more emotionally healthy. And so that's the big takeaway. That's the big upside for mediation. So that's the point. Not only that, but it's closure that's quicker, because you're not sitting there preparing for final trial. God forbid if you have to, you know, call witnesses because you have to prove this and that about finances, and, you know, get different papers together, do depositions, and God forbid, sometimes you do have depositions and divorces if if you have a lot of money or to deal with, or a lot of times if you're dealing with custody issues, they're arguing over who it should be the better parent to have the custody. Sometimes you have to have people come in, and sometimes you have to do depositions, teachers, school counselors, things like that, people like that. And so, this, kind of eliminates all of that because you're able to come to an agreement quicker and it's cheaper. Now, you do have to do a lot of things to prepare for a mediation. There's a lot of information that you need, but it's still cheaper than preparing for final trial. And it also is less wear and tear on your nerves, just anticipating that final trial date. And so that's what the point is. Okay. Now, what's in it for me, right? You're probably asking, all right, but besides what's the point, really what's in it for me? When it's all said and done, at the end of the day, what's in it for me? And what's in it for you is you get a vote. You get a vote. You get a say of how things move, how things go moving on. Hey, Carlene, it's good to see you. You have a vote of how things move in the years, days, months, and years ahead. And that's huge. And I'll tell you why. And I'm going to quote a very, very well-known, very wonderful mediator here in Texas. He's been practicing law more than 40 years. He's been a mediator for a long time also. Right now, I believe he still only exclusively does mediations because he's that good. His name is Coy Connor. And Attorney Connor always says, final trial is like driving down the highway 100 miles an hour and throwing the steering wheel out the window because you have no control. It is the judge who makes the final decision. It's the judge who's in total control. Yes, you can, present your information in a way that you hope is going to be persuasive, that the judge will do more of the things that you want him or her to do, but ultimately you have no control. And so mediation, you get a vote in what's going on. You get a vote of how things move forward. You get a say and really get an opportunity to shape an agreement or shape how things will move forward. And that's huge. That's huge because, there are a lot of wonderful judges out there, but sometimes, it's really, really difficult, having to live with what the judge rules that both of you should do. And, there's a joke, in the legal field, in the legal world, that, the judges say, well, if both parties are mad at me, I did a good job. And so, again, it's always better to have an opportunity or say how you're going to shape things, how things are going to move forward. So that's really what's in it for you. And again, besides it being cheaper and quicker for you, and besides this, again, as my girlfriend Anna always says, it cuts down on the wear and tear of your nerves. But also what's in it for you, realize that a final trial, any type of trial, when you go into court, it is an open trial, it's public. And you are having the trial in the county where you live. And so, your neighbor could walk through the door for whatever reason, and, or just anybody that your coworker, anybody could walk through the door who knows you or that you could run into later on. And you're there talking about the most intimate parts of your life, the most intimate details of your life. And when you go to mediation, mediation is a process where both parties sit down with a trained mediator. And most of the time, at least here in Texas, it's an attorney. Doesn't necessarily have to be, but most of the time, especially with family law, it's an attorney who has specialized training in mediation. And they get certified by the state bar. I'm also a certified advanced mediator, in addition to being an attorney. I'm licensed in both Texas and New York. And so mediation is a process where you and your spouse sit down with a mediator. You usually will have, you have your attorney, your spouse will have their attorney, and you sit down and you try to resolve or you try to come to agreement about every single aspect of your divorce. Child support, visitation, who's, if you bought a house, if you're going to keep the house, if you're going to sell the house, who's going to keep what percentage of what retirement accounts, all of those things. Moving forward, what things look like, how things are going to get divided, who's going to keep what assets, how assets are going to get divided, or how debts are going to get dealt with, or how they're going to get divided. And so that's really what mediation is. And a lot of times, a lot of people think, oh, do I have to be in the same room with my spouse, when this is going on? No, you do not. And a lot of times, you may start out in the same room where the mediator will come in and talk to both of you, and they'll do the kind of introduction speech and give you kind of a lay of the land and tell you what to expect and what he or she's going to do. And most of the time is an opportunity for you to meet the mediator. The mediator will tell you, they're the neutral party, that they cannot force you to do anything. They're not the judge. They cannot force you to do anything. But they're there to facilitate or help you come to an agreement, because they are very familiar with the law, and they can help you come to an agreement and help you also with ideas. A good mediator will help you with ideas to how you think outside the box. And they will also tell you, if I spend more time in one room than another, it doesn't mean that I like the other person better. It just means that we have more things that we need to kind of hash out, and it's taking just a little bit longer. And sometimes that just happens just because of personalities, because sometimes it takes a little bit longer to get on the same page. And so that doesn't mean that they don't like, that they like you less because they're spending less time in your room. But it's just a way for them to introduce themselves. Also here in Texas, and imagine just about everywhere else, every other state, mediation also is this is very important for you to remember. Mediation is a place where everything, where it's said in mediation, it stays in mediation. You cannot call the mediator as a witness. You cannot make the mediator testify. So what happens in mediation stays in mediation. And is it really that place of just total trust and confidence? The mediator has to keep your confidence. And so if you tell the mediator something in mediation, and you say, don't tell the other side this, but I'm telling you this, so this will help you to understand and be able to negotiate better with my spouse, the mediator cannot repeat it. They can use that information to better help them, to help your spouse, come a little bit closer to the middle, but they can't repeat it. And so that's how much the mediator has to keep your confidence if you tell him or her to do that. And again, and it has to be that way, because that way you're free to throw out ideas, think outside the box, throw out proposals, and have that negotiation back and forth without the fear of what you say in mediation coming back to bite you if you don't settle in mediation and you have a final trial. So let me just say that really quickly again, in a quick summary. Okay, so mediation is a process where you and your spouse, try to come to an agreement about every aspect of your divorce: assets, debts, kids, all those things. And hey, Cassandra, it's good to see you. And that's the process where the mediator has to keep your confidence. He or she cannot be called as a witness later on. So whatever you say to the mediator stays with the mediator. And whatever ideas or negotiations that go back and forth, whatever proposals or any other ideas that you give to the other side in an attempt to try to settle and try to come to an agreement, stays in mediation, and it can't come back to bite you. So if you say, you know what, it'll be okay for you to keep that retirement account if I get this, if I get this much out of the house or whatever it is. Then they can't say, well, you said mediation, So understand that. And if you tell the mediator, hey, I'm sharing this particular piece of information with you, please don't repeat it to the other side, but I'm telling you because it'd be better for you to know. So that way, when you go back in the other room, you can have that in the back of your mind as you're talking to my soon-to-be ex. Okay? So that's what mediation is. That's the benefit of it. You get a vote moving forward. It's quicker and cheaper. And it really is an opportunity for you to have a say. And for a lot of people, that's important. It's important that they feel like, okay, at least I had some say at how things are going to go moving forward. All right. Okay, so how do you make mediation work for you? How do you make it work for you? Okay, the most important thing, or one of the most important things, is define what you want. You don't want to go in mediation and try to figure out, oh, what's my bottom line? No, you want to go in there with a purpose. You want to go in there and know what your bottom lines are on, all the important things. Your bottom line, if you have a house, what your bottom line is on that. What your bottom line is about your kids, about child support, about visitation, about certain assets. All the big, assets, cars, houses, if you have a vacation home, fine, or if you have a boat or a jet ski, things, the larger purchase, the larger purchases. If you're not necessarily dealing with divorce, if you're dealing with things, if you're already divorced and you're dealing with, child support issues, or you're dealing with visitation because you're having problems with visitation, know what your bottom lines are and define what you want out of this. That'll help things to go quicker. That'll help the mediator understand, what the bottom line is and how to get to, the core of things quicker. It just makes more sense. And the less time you spend there, cheaper it's going to be. So, if you don't have to have a full day of mediation, you can only do it in half a day, in 4 hours instead of 8 hours. Then you're not paying your lawyer for the full day. You're not paying the mediator for the full day. So it just makes sense to know what you want out of it. And, it is so important when it comes to divorce, or like I said, when you're dealing with kids, whatever it is. Even if you have mediation, if you even have an issue at work and you're having to go to mediation with HR involved, all that stuff. These are all good things to know if you ever have to face any type of mediation. Here, I'm obviously centering on divorce because a lot of you ladies are going through a divorce, or you've been through a divorce and you may have things that are coming up again with kids and with money. And so it's important for you to know this. Okay. The second important thing to know is know what you need to show. And that's all about preparation, preparation, preparation. And what do I mean by that? Okay, so there are a lot of things you have to get your ducks in a row before you actually get to mediation. So for example, let's just say, for example, your ex, has been spending, he's into another relationship, and he's been spending a whole lot of money on the new person, okay, on his new love interest, right? But you guys are still on divorce yet, and he's been going to Tiffany, spending money on jewelry, or he's been taking her to Jamaica and all these other expensive trips, and you're like, hey, we ain't divorced yet. You can't be spending all this, you just, no. And so how do you show, hey, you need to pay back my portion of that. And this is use Texas as an example. Texas is a community property state. That just means that it's assumed that everything that you make, it gets split 50-50. That's essentially what that means. And so if he's spending, large amounts of money on the girlfriend, and, he spent, over the past 6 months, he spent $10,000 on her. You're like, hey, you can pay back 5 of that. If you want to throw your money away, great. But, you need to pay back 5 of that. So what do you need to do? What do you need to bring to you to mediation to show that? Get credit card receipts. Get all that stuff beforehand. Get, if there are, travel itineraries that, that you need, from, emails or whatever it is. And that's a process called discovery, which is a bit beyond this talk or this video that we're doing on mediation. But it is a process where you request documents back and forth, or you send questions for your ex to answer. And that way you will have that information when you go into mediation. And it's important to do that, especially financial information. So if you need to get bank statements, you need to know what is what. You need to know what the lay of the land. You need to know what the credit card statements are, what the credit card balances are, because you need to know what debt there is, and you need to know what assets they are, because you need to know what you're dividing when you get there. You can't walk in there and not know what the major debts are, how much is owed on your car, how much is owed on his car, all of those things. You have to know all that information. So you do have to most likely be a little bit further along in your case in order to get all that information, so that you have that, so you know what you're dividing, and tell the mediator what you are dividing. Hey, Frankie, it's good to see you. So you can tell the mediator, hey, this is what we have to divide. We need to make sure we don't leave anything out. And so, you make sure that you have a copy of the credit report. So that way you make sure you're not missing any debts that are out there. Oh, that Sears card that we had, opened up 10 years ago. Oh, I forgot all about that. There's still, whatever balance, whatever it is. You need to make sure that you have all that information walking into the mediation. So, if you want to show, hey, he's been wasting a whole lot of money, or, I've been the one who, if you had a small business, family business, hey, I'm the one, it's been my talent, it's been all my effort, that has really, driven this business and driven the income, even though, so you're trying to overcome, in Texas, you're trying to overcome the assumption that everything's 50-50. You're like, hey, I deserve more because, I did X, Y, and Z. And as a matter of fact, he did things to hurt the company because he was wasting money. He was mean to clients, whatever it is. And so if you have emails showing that he was nasty and mean to your clients and things like that, you want to bring those things to mediation, because that helps the mediator know how to approach. Hey, how do I approach this? How do I attack this? What's the strategy moving forward? Okay. And so the mediator, you can start out at the very beginning when he's giving a speech, and then you can ask, okay, once we actually start the negotiation process, you can ask to be put into a separate room. And the mediator does what I call shuttle diplomacy. He goes back and forth between the rooms with different proposals and say, hey, okay, so this is what they're proposing this time, and da-da-da, and what do you think about this? And, what do you think about this? Okay, all right, so that's not the best thing. What do you think about this? And so that's what the process kind of looks like. So know what you need to show, because that drives the next thing. Get the right documents. And again, we just touched on that just a minute ago, talking about, what's the best, documents to get: bank statements, retirement account statements, tax statements, copy of your deed, a copy of the registration to your car, because sometimes you forget, is the car registered in both our names or is it just mine? So you forget all that stuff. So that drives how you're going to spend your money and your energy, what documents to get. If you think he's been having an affair, get those emails with him, talking all sweet nothings to, to the girlfriend, know what documents to get. Yeah, if you got that going on, bring that stuff to mediation, because those things can be important to, have that type of influence and tip the scales just a little bit. Now, I'm not saying that, you're doing anything that's not considered to be ethical. But if there are things going on that cause the breakup of the marriage, and you say, what, I believe, if you're trying to prove fault, and there's such a thing in every state. There's no fault divorce, and that way, you don't have to prove that somebody did something wrong. But if you're trying to prove fault because you want a bigger piece of the pie, and you're saying, I was the bad actor, then, you do want to bring those emails, him and the girlfriend talking and, all that business. You do, if you got pictures, whatever it is, if you had those things where he took her on vacation to Jamaica and then he splashed it all over Facebook, and you have those, you have mutual friends who took, snapshots of those pictures on Facebook and gave them to you, you want to bring those to mediation, because, that's where you assert or where you really have that type of influence and tip the scales and this pressure on the other side, and use that in an ethical way, because if it's the truth, it's the truth, right? And you're not making up something, you're not photoshopping something that didn't exist. I'm not saying that, but you're saying it's something that honestly happened, and if you need to use it for your advantage to come to an agreement, then that's the best thing. Hey, LaTanya, it's good to see you. Thank you for joining us. Okay. And the most important thing here, which a lot of times is the most difficult, especially if you have children, is keeping perspective, keeping right perspective. And what I mean by that is keeping your emotions in check. and really trying your best to treat this as a business transaction, and trying to keep that in the forefront of your mind the entire time that you're in the mediation session. And I say that because, and I know that's hard, especially, when you're dealing with kids. You're like, look, this is my kids. You're telling me to, I'm supposed to act like this is any other business transaction? Are you kidding me? But what I am asking you is to try to help if you have an attorney, or if you don't, that's fine, but the mediator, try to help the mediator think strategically as much as possible and when you're less emotional, you're able to be more creative. And there's studies that show this. When you're under less pressure, when you're not all excited, when you're not all upset, your brain, it's easier for your brain to be more creative, to think outside the box, to come to different ideas that will help you come to an agreement, to help you to think outside the box and say, hey, what if we do this, this, and this? That probably work better for him, and I know that definitely worked better for me. That'll help us come to an agreement on this particular issue. And so if you are able to look at it more as a business transaction, and look at it like this. If somebody told you, you know what, you're going to have to sit there and tell your ex how wonderful he is and how great a person he is, and if you do that, I'll give you $2 million. If you keep a poker face and you do that and you just tell them how great and wonderful it is, wouldn't you be able to do it? And so I'm just saying, for your kids' sake, for your own sake, if there's any chance for you to come to an agreement, try your best to keep that poker face and absolutely look at it as more of a business transaction. And, if somebody said, I'll give you $500,000 if you're able to look at this mediation as a business transaction, you'd be able to do it. And so that's all that I'm saying. Try to think about how much better things are moving forward if you're able to do that and come to an agreement and do that quicker. If you don't have to use the whole day, don't use the whole day. So absolutely do that. So another thing, just general things to expect, what to expect in a mediation session. We talked a lot about, the confidentiality part of it. You can't call the mediator as a witness ever. That just destroys. Mediation would never work because everybody's scared to death that whatever they say is going to come back to bite them. We talk about, shuttle diplomacy. A lot of times you may start out in the same place, but then you separate into separate rooms, and then you try to come to an agreement on all parts of your divorce, all aspects of your divorce. Also know, you have, the documents that you need, if you need to show how much money he's making, if he makes bonus, if he has fringe benefits that you can try to translate into, what is the money value of that? If he has travel points, try to convert that. What does that mean? If he has, X amount of points with American Airlines, what is the real value of that? All those things, that drives, what you need to show drives what the documents need. So that also gives you an idea of what to expect, how to prepare for it. It's almost as if you're preparing for final trial, but a lot less of the nerves, a lot less of the draw and pull on your emotions. You'll also, so again, if you're dealing with kiddos, you want documents showing how much income he makes. You want at least a few years or 3 years of tax return information to give you, just a good idea. You want the most recent, pay stubs, all of those things that you bring to mediation to help the mediator say, okay, this is probably what the judge is going to set child support at, and he'll go in there and say, look, dude, this is what you make. This is probably what the judge is going to do. Let's just come to agreement on this. So that's really how that goes. The other thing is also know what the tax consequences are if you take a particular asset. So in other words, you say, you know what, I make enough money. We bought a house and I make enough money to stay in the house after he leaves. I haven't make enough on my income. Obviously know, okay, so you're going to be dealing with paying the property taxes. But, the flip side of that is at the end of the year, you get to deduct that from your taxes. So factor all those things in, when you're negotiating, and when you're thinking about, defining what you want before you get there, what your bottom lines are. You're thinking about the tax consequences. You're thinking about, if you're going to ask for, child support, how does that factor into my taxes? All those things, you're thinking about as you're preparing for mediation. Or even outside of mediation, you're divorced already and you're having an issue about child support. You want to make sure you have all the information that you can possibly use to be able to prove income. Now, let me just give you this quick tip. For ladies, if you're dealing with an ex who has a business or has a career that deals a lot with cash, let's just say he's a barber, he cuts hair for a living, or if he is a mechanic, and does any type of auto repair or any type of auto body repair or anything like that that tends to deal with a lot of cash, or construction sometimes, they have some folks that'll pay under the table, all those things, or if he's driving, nowadays Uber, it's difficult, before, kind of taxi driving, it's more cash based. Now it's more instant, kind of the credit card. But anything, if he has a profession, or if he's just living a gypsy lifestyle, moving frequently and having frequent jobs, and you're trying to figure out, okay, how do I calculate child support? How do I calculate how much money he makes on that? One thing you can do is, let's say, for example, he's living in a particular neighborhood and he's living with, 2 roommates, and he's saying, oh, these are my friends, and right now they know I'm going through a rough time and they just let me stay there. I'm not paying anything. You can go on Realtor.com, or you can go on a website called Zillow, Z as in zebra, ILLOW, .com, and you can look up what the fair market rate is for a apartment in that area. And you can say, what, great, hey, his friends are letting him stay there, that's great. But you know what, that's a gift to him, because normally he, if there was, this 3-bedroom place, he'd be paying X amount. If you divide it into, thirds, he'd be paying this, and then usually the utility for a place that has the square footage is this, and you can try to argue, hey, Tanya, it's good to see you. You can argue, this is what he would normally be paying. And so his friends allowing him to stay there is really a gift, and not handing him cash, but it really should be converted or looked at as cash. And this is what the value is. And so you can use different tools like that, and you can bring in a print off from Realtor.com or Zillow.com and say, this is the neighborhood that he lives in, and this is a 3-bedroom. This is usually the square footage of it in that area, and this is how much they're charging for 3 bedrooms, and this is this should be used to calculate his real income, or what he's really capable of paying. All of those things. So again, mediation is a place where you can think outside the box to help you get to an agreement and get there quicker and cheaper. And so that's really, really, really important. Okay, so I promised you that I would tell you the 2 most important things that you should make sure that you cover in a mediation session if you're going through a divorce, that you don't want to leave that session without touching on and coming to an agreement on these things. Number 1, bank accounts. Bank accounts is one of the things that really get glossed over and forgotten about and all that good stuff. Bank accounts. You need to deal with bank accounts, especially, obviously, if you have joint accounts. And I say that because a lot of times people get divorced and, they're still on each other's bank accounts. And God forbid, sometimes the ex, they don't like the way things went down in the mediation, or they don't like the way it went down if you didn't settle in mediation and you had a final trial, and they get angry and they start writing checks and they know there's not enough money in the account. And before you know it, you're stuck with a whole bunch of non-insufficient fund fees. I know one lady was talking about almost $600 in bank fees in 1 month because the ex got pissed off and started running up these bank fees, and just stuck her, with these bank fees. And so you don't want to put yourself in that situation. You want to make sure that you just discuss who's going to keep what bank accounts, or if you're going to close all the joint ones, you have an agreement that you identify which bank accounts those are. And you say, our Chase bank checking account ending in, and you put the last 3 digits of that account. And so you want to make sure you specifically identify the account, and you put down an absolute date of when that account gets closed and what happens if he doesn't do it. So there'll be consequences. Okay, if he doesn't take his name off the account, then by this date, then this is what's going to happen. So that way, there's a clear understanding of what's going on. So if God forbid, if you do have to go back to court on that, you get a clear roadmap for the judge to be able to punish him for not doing what he was supposed to do. But if you don't cover it, and you end up in a world of mess, then you don't have a good, solid, concrete foundation for the judge to do what I say is, close his head in the door a few times. But if you have a specific date, if you specifically identify which accounts those are, that gives the judge the power to slam his head in the door a couple of times because he didn't do what he's supposed to do. And so you want to make sure that you cover all of those things with bank accounts and making sure. And also know this too, some of the larger bank chains, if you have a joint account and you're closing an account, they'll ask both of you to come down and sign. So and I was surprised by that one time, and I said, okay. So that's one of the things you need to call and find out before you get to mediation. Be like, hey, we have this bank account with, let's say, I'm in front of it. You have this bank account with Bank of America. And Bank of America says, they want us both to come down and close this account. So what I did was that, look, you deal with one person, one customer service person at Bank of America. I don't care if it's, the vice president of that branch. I could care less. Whoever it is, just make sure you're dealing with one person. And you say, look, going to a divorce. I know that you want us both to come down and close the account. Can I come in 30 minutes beforehand, give you a copy of my driver's license so it's me? I'll sign. I'll show you a copy of our divorce papers so you see it's me. And then have my ex come in 30 minutes later because I don't necessarily want to. And I had to do that once. I had to call the bank and say, hey, can my client come in 30 minutes early? And that worked out perfect, So that way you don't, not sitting, looking across from each other, giving each other the evil eye, whatever, or stirring up stuff, whatever it is. Because sometimes things are still so fresh and so raw, and closing bank accounts and, thinking about all of the financial loss, that just gets so stirred up. And, if you can avoid that, avoid it. So that's one idea. Again, another golden nugget of you attending my free webinar. See, that's why you should always attend my free webinars. You always get these really good nuggets of information. That even if that's not something you're facing right now, you may be hearing a good friend of yours talking about this stuff. And you're like, hey, Laura told me in this webinar, da-da-da. So that's a very, very good, important information. So that's one of the most important things that you want to make sure that you cover. You don't leave at mediation without talking about bank accounts and how you're going to deal with that. If one person's keeping a bank account, when they have to go and take their name off, and what happens if they don't do it. They have to pay you, if they don't do it by the deadline, then they have to pay you $100 for each month that they don't do it, or whatever it is, whatever sanctions you want to put on there ahead of time to give him incentive to get his butt down there and do it. So that way you're not wringing your hands and laying awake at night saying, oh my gosh, we left that, uncovered and it's starting to be a mess. Okay, so bank accounts. Number 2, if you owned a house, if you guys bought a house during your relation, during your marriage, the most important thing, number 2, the most important thing, if you bought a house, if your ex is buying you out, say for example, you say, you know what, this is too much house for me, or I really can't afford the payments, or I'd rather just right now, just really recover financially. It's better for me to just be able to live in a smaller place and rent for 2 years or so until I really get back on my feet. You want to make sure that if he's buying you up, he's staying in the house, or if you're selling the house, you want to make sure that it is the title company who pays you your share. You don't want to be asking for your share from your ex. don't do it. Even if you don't suspect, it shouldn't be a big deal. Just make sure you specify when the house gets sold, the title company pays me my portion directly. Don't be, chancing that the ex is gonna, and I've heard of situations where, a month later, the ex was supposed to pay within 30 days after the house got sold, and somehow the money disappeared. God forbid, he goes and puts the money in a bank account in the Cayman Islands and you can't get to it. Or, he just blows it, God forbid if he has some type of addiction like gambling or drugs or drinking, whatever it is, and that money disappears. You want to make sure that the title company pays you your share. So that way there's no doubt that you're going to get what you're supposed to get when the house gets sold. Absolutely. That is non-negotiable. Whenever there's a house that gets sold, I don't care if it's a friendly divorce. I always used to put in my divorce degrees, always in my mediation agreements, that the title company pays. End of story. So that way there's not an issue. Okay, there is a comment, so I just want to make sure it's not a question in there that you want me to answer. Okay, Cassandra, okay, I'm just taking a look. Just one moment, please. If you're talking about mediation for divorce, are these pointers good for mediation when it comes to parenting plans? Yes, there are. Yes, they are. Absolutely, because you're dealing with a lot of the same things. Okay, so the question was, if the parents were never married, but you're trying to come to an agreement about a parenting plan for your child, are these, what I'm talking about, are these things good, or do they apply when you're dealing with just coming up with a parenting plan? Yes, absolutely. Because you still want to know what your bottom line is as far as the parenting plan. A lot of times, a lot of marriages now are international, and so especially if your ex was born in another country and they still have relatives, what's your bottom line? Is it, you don't want your kids to leave the U.S. until they're 18? Are there certain areas of the world that you don't want your kids going to because, you're not necessarily sure they come back? So know what your bottom lines are. If there are certain people that you believe are emotionally unhealthy for your kids, what's the bottom line with that? If, let's just say grandpa has a drinking problem, do you want to limit, grandpa's exposure to your kids? All those things, so if his dad, is a drinker or whatever it is, or, if there are people who you feel are emotionally are a danger to your kids. And I don't mean just, that they're, they have a nasty attitude. I really mean that they have like a drug problem, or that they are neglectful. They'll leave your kids somewhere. They won't feed your kids right. Your kids will come back with the same clothes and the same underwear they had on 3 days before and no shower, things like that. If they're people that you want, so know what your bottom lines are. You want to know what you need to show. So say, for example, whenever your kid is with your ex, and if they have a test or homework due, it's always late, then you may want to bring those school records and say, every single weekend when my ex has the kids, whatever test or my kids' test score or their school performance goes down. So you need to know what to show, what documents to get, and again, try to think of it as a business transaction. So you can get in, get out, and know what you need to accomplish, know what you need to get done. Because it's easy to get distracted, it's easy to get emotional, it's easy to get off track, and that always costs you time and money. It always does. So absolutely, it is absolutely good for parenting plans, trying to figure out what's what. One of the things that I did, and I've spoken about this before, so if you heard this before, forgive me. But for those of you that's never heard of this before, it's very, very, very important. I had one client who had a problem where her ex would never show up on time for visitation. Sometime, he's supposed to pick up, the kid, their child, every first, third, and fifth Friday of the month at 6 o'clock. So just come pick him up at 6 o'clock Friday, every other Friday. That's what he's supposed to do. Sometimes he'd show up at 7:30. Sometimes he wouldn't show up until Saturday morning. Sometimes he wouldn't show up at all and would not communicate with my client. She's like, would you, so she's texting him and figuring out, are you coming, tomorrow? Are you coming tonight? When, are you coming at all? You haven't let me know what's going on. I need to plan for my life. Am I going to have a weekend, or am I, or I having our son this weekend? What's going on? So it looked like she was like the desperate ex-wife who couldn't let go, but she's just trying to figure out what the heck he's doing, so she can figure out whether she can go out with her girlfriends or not, or will she have her child that weekend, or can she do whatever, and so she was like, oh my gosh, I got divorced 18 months ago and I don't have money to go back to court, and I'm all spent and wrung out from the divorce emotionally. I just don't want to go through all this crap again, and how can I deal with this? And because I don't want to go back to court. And so I said, well, you know what? You might have to be a little patient, but this is what we're going to do. And so I laid out an out of box, solution, out of court solution for her. And I said, all right, every time that he's supposed to have your child, and he doesn't, and he's more than 20 minutes late, I said, you're going to text him and say, are you coming? This is not good for our son. He doesn't know what to expect. I don't know what to tell him. And it is something that is affecting, and it was affecting his schoolwork. And, you always keep it all about the child. Whenever you're texting your ex, you're always keeping it all about the child. And so she's like, okay, that's what we're doing. And so it took about almost 3 months. But she had, she would print out the text messages. She would, send the text message to her computer and then print out from there. Sometimes, right now, depending on what type of smartphone you have, you can print from a wireless printer just from your smartphone and print your text messages that way. You can screenshot the text messages and print them directly from your smartphone. But that's what she was able to do. She had a smartphone where she was able to screenshot the text messages and print them directly from her phone. And, she had a stack about, this big after about, almost 3 months. And, she sat down and said, look, and she threw she put the text messages down in front of him and said, look, this is what the judge is going to see, because you don't know what you're doing and you don't tell me what you're doing. And our child, ever since this has been going on, his schoolwork's been in the toilet, and this is the school records to show it. And I'm going to ask the judge to just make sure that you have visitation just once a month, if that. And what you think about that? And of course, all this time I told her, all this 3 months, I said, don't ever tell him what you're doing. Just send a text message and leave it at that. And so he was shocked because she would always share everything with him, So the fact that she was able to keep that a secret, and just, put that down on the table and said, what you think about that? He's like, oh, well, maybe she would be able to, pull that off and limit my visitation. And sure enough, he ended up, after that, he communicated with her much better. It was just all about the kid. He treated her with more respect. And their son's grades went way up because he felt valued by his dad. He felt like, okay, now I'm a priority. And so that's the type of kind of out of the box thinking, that can really benefit. And so you need to know what to show, what documents, how to set up your end of it. All those things are important for mediation. And that's something that you can bring to mediation. So you're like, you know what, since we've been separated, we've been separated for a year, and, this is how visitation's been going. And you can bring those text messages and give it to the mediator and say, you know what, unless he starts to straighten up and fly right, this is what I'm going to be asking the judge to do. And that's, and mediator can look at it and say, you know what, that very well may be, what she gets away with, if you don't start doing X, Y, and Z. And so, yeah, absolutely know what you need to show. Bring the documents that you need to bring. And that could really make the difference and tip the scale. And for you to have leverage that you need to get more of what you want. Okay, another question is, when sharing an account, do you spend the money? Okay, let me just answer. Let me use Texas as an example. Okay, since Texas, if you're married, if you're legally married, or if it's even an informal marriage, but if you meet that definition of an informal marriage, then half of what's in there is assumed to be yours. Now, if you have money in there that was from an inheritance or a gift or something like that, it gets a little stickier because then you start to talk about money that's what they call commingled. Most of the time, things that are the inheritance or things that are a gift, even if you are married, even if you're married when you receive it, that is usually considered to be separate property in Texas, and as also other community property states. And in a lot of other states too, that's the rule. And so that really depends. So if it's, money that's just from working, just from your job, then, if you're in Texas, it's assumed to be 50-50. So yeah, if it's a shared account, a lot of times some people say, okay, at the very beginning, you can, if nobody's filed anything, you can take out 50%, put it in a separate account. You're not hiding it because you're going to tell them how much is in that account, the account number and all that. But a lot of times women do that because the guys, especially if they make more money, they'll take all the money, then put pressure on the women and say, you know what, you're not going to be able to meet your bills next month unless you agree to X, Y, and Z. So some attorneys will say, take out 50%, at least you'll have access to that to be able to pay for an attorney, be able to meet your monthly bills, all that stuff for, for whatever amount of time. But at least you get a little bit of a head start, and you don't get to you don't look on your online bank account and see that the account is zero, and you don't have, money to pay your car note next month. And they use that for leverage against you. And so that's kind of the somewhat complicated answer to that. But again, if this is money that, that is just from you working your paycheck or his paycheck, it's not an inheritance money, it's not anything special like that, then, so a lot of times they'll say, take out 50% and we'll deal with everything either in mediation or in final trial. Okay, let me see if there's any other questions. Okay, I don't see anything else. Okay, so for the remainder of this week, if you have questions maybe you didn't think of right now, but later on in the week, you're like, oh yeah, you know what? I'm wondering about this. You can, until the end of this week, you can send your questions or your comments to my email, clientcare@moveonafterdivorce.com, and I'll be more than happy to try to answer your questions or answer your concerns or your comments. Okay? So, ladies, I hope that you find that helpful. If you know of someone who's facing mediation, whether it's during divorce or after, absolutely share the link of this video with them. I would appreciate it. And again, if you have any questions, clientcare@moveonafterdivorce.com. And that'll be good until Saturday night, this Saturday night at midnight. Okay, you can send your questions and your comments. All right. Thank you, ladies. Sharon, you're wonderful. Carlene, Cassandra, Frankie, LaTanya, Tanya. You ladies are wonderful. Thank you so much. And I hope that you found this to be, and look for future free webinars. There's going to be one I'm going to be doing about dating and about setting yourself up. You're very welcome, Tanya. You're very welcome. So one of the webinars that I'm developing and working on is about dating and about setting yourself up to attract the type of person that you want to be in a relationship with, and really how to, in the process, help yourself to grow and be more confident. And we're going to be talking about body language and how we make assumptions, even if they're subconscious, how we make assumptions about other people and maybe some of the things that people may be assuming about us, and how to improve that. And that not only helps you in dating, that also helps you in your career, in your job field. If you're going for a promotion, or if you're thinking about changing jobs or changing careers, how do you look more confident? How do you come off more confident? And do that naturally and not seem like you're putting on airs or you're pretending to be somebody that you're not. And in the process, really have that be something that really helps you to grow as a person, and be something that not only that you practice, but just becomes a part of your personality, and really helps you be more engaging, all those things. And even as far as topics are concerned, ladies, even if there are other webinars that you think, you know what, I always want to know about this, or I think this is important for single ladies, I am always open to your ideas and your suggestions for different topics and things that you would want for me to talk about. One of the things is I want to make sure that I'm giving you information that actually serves you, that you can use, that really helps you to move on to just living at a higher level, even as a single person, or if you're in a relationship, or if you're on track to wanting to get remarried again. I want to make sure that you're living the very best life that you can. So I want your suggestions. I want your ideas. I want your input. All right. Thank you, ladies. All right. So I'm working just as hard as I can, Frankie, on that. Okay. And try to get that up and running just as soon as I can. I really hope to do that within the next 4 to 6 weeks, but probably earlier than that. But I'm shooting for the next 4 weeks to really develop that and get that going. All right. But I got to do a little bit more research. I want to make sure it's good, okay? All right, ladies, thank you so much. I hope you enjoyed this free webinar. Good night.